All right, good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to this particular session, Deconstructing Implicit Bias in Construction. In construction. My name is Tim McMurtry. I serve as the Executive Director of Infrastructure Business Development at NAMAC, National Association of Minority Contractors, Wisconsin. Delighted to be here with you all this morning. Before we get into our panel discussion, we just have a little bit of housekeeping to do. It won't be painful at all. I just need your participation and full attention. If wherever you're sitting at right now, if you can just scoot to the front of your chair, just scoot to the front of your chair. Just scoot to the front of your chair. Don't fall off the chair. Okay. Now you can sit back. That was it. Painless, not a problem at all. So after the session, when people ask you, hey, how was that implicit bias session? You can say, OMG, even the moderator had us on the edge of our seats. All right. Now, is the ice sufficiently broken? Ice broken? All right. All right. Let's get on into this then. So I wanted to kind of start out with just a historical backdrop to give us context of what we're going to be discussing today. And in this Deconstructing Implicit Bias in Construction, this panel discussion, the reason why we titled it as such was because back in the day, there were some hardcore beefs that took place. Primarily, it was racism that locked out certain groups from the construction industry. And implicit is that even though some of the things that were done before, let's say the calling of N-words and all those kinds of things might not happen today, there's still some things that work as effective barriers to entry, which we are looking to overcome and push through. So back in 1827, Philadelphia workers established the Mechanics Union of Trade Association. That was the first centralized labor union in American history, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer. Black artisans and other ethnic minorities were not included in the growing movement of workers' rights. And so much so that from that time up until the 60s, just to give us some perspective, I'm a 70s baby. So the 60s were right 15 minutes before I came on the scene. So when we talk about challenges, it's not ancient history. Those challenges were existent in our lifetime. And so what we want to be able to do is continue to move the needle forward and not look at this as a challenge of antiquity, but a challenge of recent history, that we have a golden opportunity to push the envelope forward from beyond. In 1967, because the unions and the different trade associations were so homogenous with just white folks, people of color weren't able to get into them. 1967, President Lyndon Baines Johnson piloted a federal affirmative action program in the city of Philadelphia, calling it the Philadelphia Plan. Now, given that backdrop, we're not beholden to the past. We're not prisoners of the past. More so, we are torchbearers for the future. And that's what this distinguished panel is going to talk about here today. According to global data, the U.S. construction market size was valued at $1.96 trillion in 2021, and it's expected to grow more than 3% annually between this year through 2026, which means that there's ample opportunity for everybody to eat. We all can have our cake and eat it too. Recently, the federal government passed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, of which we've all been talking about and much ballyhooed. And the bill includes funding for a wide range of infrastructure projects, not limited to transportation, but also including bridges, electric grid, energy, public transit, airports, broadband, internet, and much more. So you, DBE firms, can get in on the reindeer games, both from the skilled labor side as well as from the professional services side of things. Why are we here? DBE programs, such as the program here in Wisconsin, were created to provide profit and project experience to historically disenfranchised businesses. was an opportunity for everybody to get in on the reindeer games, so to speak. And as we've seen previously, the reason why these programs were necessitated was because left to one's own volition, folks weren't necessarily opening up the doors as wide as they could have been opened. This is not a zero-sum game. To let other folks in does not mean that you take food off your table, but this isn't an either or, it's a both and. We all can win, and that's what we're looking to do. That said, the opportunity is now to plug into a generational opportunity, and our distinguished panel is here to share some of the ways how this can be accomplished. On our stage here, we have Daniel Webster. As I call your name, please raise your hand as I'm reading from here so folks can identify who you are. Daniel Webster, he's the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Walbec Group. We also have joining us is Brian Michels, Supplier Diversity Manager, Michels Corporation. We also have Willie Smith, Executive Director, Northwest Side Community Development Corporation. We also have Quinn Long, President, Clearcut Solutions, Concrete Sawing and Drilling. And last but not least, we have the Joshua Johnson, Director, National Hub for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, long title, in Registered Apprenticeship. Give him a hand, please. So, gentlemen, I'll ask some of these questions will be general questions for the entire panel. Others will be directed to specific members based on your area of expertise and your niche. General question to the entire panel. We'll start on this end first and work our way to my right. What, in your estimation, would be just general advantages to being a certified DBE contractor?
From my perspective, I would say that it definitely opens doors and offers additional opportunities to business owners. And, you know, it shines a light on the fact that you are dealing with a disadvantaged business. So when it comes to funding, when it comes to overall support that could be provided to the business owner, I represent the Northwest Side Community Development Corporation in Milwaukee, and we provide small business lending. So knowing that this business is aspiring to grow and expand within the industry they're working in helps us to help them with technical assistance, funding, or what have you. Thank you.
Excellent. Quinn.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Indeed.
What are the advantages to being a certified DBE? I would say programs like this that open up the door to meet prime contractors that I could send bids to. Otherwise, if I send bids to prime contractors, they have no idea who I am if I'm just sending it online. So networking events like this has been the best advantage.
Excellent, excellent. Dan?
So we are a prime contractor. I think one of the big advantages, though, is what this gentleman talked about, is having, you know, a little bit more support as a DBE. People can reach out to you as well as your efforts to reach out to others. But I think, again, it's just having some additional support through the prime contractor and the mentor protege program as well.
Excellent. Joshua. Gotcha. It's all good. Brian.
I agree with what the other gentleman said, but I would also like to add, with the networking, it provides you with an opportunity to meet other DB contractors, other minority and diverse contractors, so that you could network and share experiences and to share questions amongst your peers. Owning a business is often very lonely. You got your wife to talk to about it, or your husband, and you got your employees to talk to. But other than that, you're isolated. This is an excellent example of an opportunity place for us to talk with each other.
Excellent. So given that, you know, I think it was touched upon maybe in one of the earlier sessions that we have in all sectors, an aging workforce, and that necessitates us building a pipeline of sorts. Joshua, with the registered apprenticeship piece, what is the approach of JFF with regards to registered apprenticeships in terms of building that pipeline so that as these years of projected growth in projects, next 5, 10, 15 years takes place, the silver tsunami with folks moving out can be replenished by, you know, new blood, if you will, coming in?
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to take it back. I'm going to take a little bit step back before JFF. So for those that don't know, I am the former state director of Wisconsin Apprenticeship. So prior to David Polk, who's now in that position, I was in that position after Karen Morgan retired. And during my time in Wisconsin Apprenticeship, one of the focuses that we had, which translates right over to JFF, which is a national nonprofit, the biggest focus that we had was there's a lack, obviously, of diversity in the construction industry, right? Construction makes up 75, 80% of the apprenticeship contracts in a given state and almost in the country, right? 75 to 80%. But when you look at the workforce that's tied to that, the whole workforce is majority white male, and white male in middle-aged white men or baby boomer age white men are engaged in that in construction, right? It's been that way. We all know that. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know already. But what I tried to do and what my focus was is looking at industry and saying, how do we encourage individuals who are Black and brown, who men or women, who may have a disability? How do we encourage them to get into an industry? And what I started to do was to think about, you encourage them to get into the industry by showing them they have an opportunity to become a business owner one day. Many times when I met with a lot of people, when I was in the city of Milwaukee, I would talk to folks and they're like, yeah, I'd love to I want to do construction because I want to remodel houses, right? That's the number one thing people, when they want to do construction, people think construction is just construction. But you have that conversation with them and you're understanding that what they need that opportunity, and that's where apprenticeship comes in. They need that opportunity to go through, get that formal training, but then they have that opportunity to own their own business. Now, where that becomes beneficial is once they own their own business, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go back and recruit diversity because that's who they're going to hire. And that's how you start to change the tide. That's how you start to change moving forward. We have to get individuals into that pipeline in the beginning and during the apprenticeship programs, give them certain training or give them exposure. I would say exposure to entrepreneurial classes, right? So many times apprenticeship is just locked into that's what you're going to do the rest of your career. But I'm a perfect example up here. I was a laborer with Local 113. I built highways in Wisconsin and Illinois. I will never build another highway, right? I wear a suit now for work and I travel and talk. I'm not going to build another highway. But we're not preparing individuals and we're not showing people what that pathway looks like. So when I think about DBE employers, that's the one thing I think about is how can you help to engage those next folks that are coming up, get them through the system and then get them exposed to owning a business? How can you be that mentor to them to own their own business? And that's how you start to expand.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We were just last week in a NAMAC national conference in Las Vegas last week at the MGM Grand. And one of the contractors there was talking about how the MGM Grand hotels, casinos, their whole organization, not only as a project owner, opens up doors of opportunity to ethnic diverse businesses and contractors, but after they award the contract, they mentor them. Gentleman was talking about he's been mentored for about 5 or 6 years with the organization, and he's been able to secure over $70 million in contracts. And so to that point you just made, Josh, this is to the entire panel, how important is mentorship to a DBE once they do get the foot in the door? I do get the contract. I might be in a space where it's the largest thing I've ever done. Is mentorship something that's crucial or something that one can live with or live without? We'll start from that end. Brian, what's your take on mentorship as one builds relationship?
I think mentorship and learning from other people's mistakes is most important. I think you have to talk to people and have somebody take you on a guided path towards your development. I don't think it's essential because I believe that people obviously persevere and they get through it. But of course, or get to success in business without being mentored. But let me say clearly that the problem with the College of Hard Knocks is the tuition. right? That's the problem with it. And if you can find a way to get through this without going through that, and someone can guide you and show you things, and especially if your mentor knows the market and can help you through what you're trying to do, there's no price you can put on that. It's absolutely essential in that scenario.
Excellent, Josh.
So when I think about mentorship and think about just a very big, focus of what mentorship is, and I think about, there's always this struggle for us as Black and brown folks to get ahead, right? We're always struggling to get ahead, and when we get ahead, many times, we forget to bring somebody with us. And I take it back to, Leah Collins-Warchek, who used to be in here, or, who was over the Walbec program and now is one of the division administrators. One of the things that she taught me as a mentor when I worked for her at Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is, as you take a step up, make sure you take someone with you. And I think when I think about mentorship, especially in the construction arena, the fact that there are not enough of us out there as it is, when we get those opportunities, we really have to, we have to focus, and we have to look and say, I need to be intentional, because this isn't just about me. Many times people think about, well, if I mentor Brian, Brian's going to take my contracts, or if I mentor Brian, Brian's going to take my money. But we have to get out of that worrying about what someone's going to do and start to think about the industry. What is if I mentor Brian, now Brian's able to mentor another person and it's continue to go on. We have to think about it in that way for us to have a foothold in the industry. Otherwise, if I just keep to myself and I don't mentor somebody else, our footprint in the industry is going to continue to stay small.
Dan?
Again, from the point of a prime contractor and not a DBE, I think mentorship is really critical. There's a few DBEs in this space right now in this room that we've helped along, but as a prime contractor, we're always open and willing to help other contractors get to where they need to be. I think there's a lot of, from my experience, there's a lot of nuances and complexity when it comes to bidding work, to learning how some of the things that exist within the DOT, and just even in being compliant, right? There's just so much there. So that mentorship from the prime contractor is really critical in terms of a DBE understanding that space.
Gotcha. Thank you. Quinn, as a DBE that's done work both with municipalities as well as private, how has mentorship impacted you? Has it been an important thing or not so much? And how is it, what role has it played in you and in your business endeavors thus far?
Real quick, for those of you who don't know, I started my company in 2019 with absolutely nothing. So not by a formality, I truly am disadvantaged in business. To go with what Mr. Mitchell said, choosing mentors and that kind of guide you along into the School of Hard Knocks, those are the people I talk to in real life. As far as mentorship goes in the public sector versus the private sector, I think that it doesn't matter. They need to guide your company in a way where you can sustain growth. And through my experiences, my public sector mentor versus private sector mentor, I would say my private sector mentor is my best client. Not only have they given me a opportunity to grow on, but I've sustained, I've grown. I was a one-man band. Now I have four employees working in the field right now. And I'm here today with you, where before with my mentorship program and DOT work, I was riding a saw. I was at the networking event. I'm fixing the saw. I'm doing everything possible, wearing every hat at the same time. And it's been very difficult to grow in public sector work because of the payment schedule. So I've had to diversify my services that help me sustain just being in business in general and paying for that hard knock tuition through my performances.
Oh, that's an excellent segue as the mic comes to Willie. We're going to go into the show me the money section of today. I almost feel like a preacher up in here. Show me the money. So Will, one of the things we hear after a person gets opportunity, after they have some mentorship, some relationship building, I hear oftentimes, hey, it's the money crunch that's tough. And you all are doing some creative financing in this space and other spaces. Can you share a bit about what you all are doing to help maybe extend lines of credit and different things like that to help business owners, survive and thrive?
Sure. As I stated, Northwest Side Community Development Corporation is a CDFI in Milwaukee. We lend to small businesses $250 to $1 million. We take a somewhat creative approach at lending at times. I mean, we do all of the analysis that the banks will do, but when we find the issues, which typically there are issues, we determine if there's a way beyond it. We don't just stop and say, okay, this doesn't necessarily check all the boxes exactly the way we want them checked, so we're not going to do the deal. That's not the way we operate. If we can look at it, and oftentimes, we're going back to mentoring. Mentoring is an important aspect of what we do. For the clients we lend to, we provide a significant amount of post-funding technical assistance, which is basically mentoring. And you got to think about it this way. If you've started your business, you were, I just heard that story just a second ago. You start your business on your own. It's you. It's possibly a side hustle, possibly something you're doing until you can grow it. Well, once you start to grow, at what point does someone pull your code and share with you how you need to systematize, how you need to operate, how you need to manage your money and all the other components? And also, what do you actually need when it comes to employees? Who do you need? Before it was you wearing 10 hats. Now you've moved up a bit. You need more support. You need more on the administrative side. You may need more workers. You may need this, that, or the other. But logistically, there's a lot to deal with when a business is growing, especially if it's a startup. And when it comes to our lending, I would say that we took a look at all of that. I mean, we see the issues. I mean, it's not like we're just looking at the numbers. We're actually holding conversations, getting greater understanding as to what this business is doing, what they're trying to do, and what they're going to need to do to grow their business. And oftentimes, we will find an industry professional to work with this business owner to help them to move to the next level. If it's something that we have experience with in-house, that's one thing, we can handle it. But if it's something that is not, within our wheelhouse, which construction is not in mine, we'd find someone else who would come in and, work with the business owner and help them to grow and scale their operations. And when it comes to financing, we take a common sense approach to what we're doing. There are a lot of, ratio analysis and, financial evaluations and such that are made when we're lending money to small businesses. But at the same time, there's oftentimes some areas where we could find an opportunity to support this business if only they did this, or if only they had that. And mentoring is a key aspect to that. Number of the loans that we've had, that we've originated in the recent past, we've required that they work with someone and put certain systems in place to ensure that they're operating based on best practices. And for us, for a lot of lenders, the deal closes and it's congratulations, good luck. For us, it's congratulations, we will likely see you next month. So we really stay in lockstep with the businesses. So when they have an issue, as the business progresses, and they will have an issue, we're already there. We likely knew about the problem when they found out about it, and we can help them to work through it. Because another thing that we've learned is that the biggest issue with the number of businesses we work with is ignorance. They didn't know this, they didn't know that, and they made some blunder, some mistake that costed them in some way, shape, or form. And what we try to do is work with them to prevent that by providing mentoring and also just being there to support them as they grow and scale and operate their businesses.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
One of the other things that we hear is when a person, they muster up the courage to, Quinn has done, pull themselves up by the bootstraps and, go on out and go into different spaces that they might not have been regularly acclimated with, that there's already a rhythm, a culture, a vibe that's already established, and you're coming into that new vibe, that new space. So is there a tendency or how do DBEs best resist the urge to, let's say, try to overcome relationship deficit. I go to a prime, the prime already has relationships with someone who does what I do. And instead of showing me the love, they go with that person they're most familiar with. I mean, it's at their own discretion. But now I might be forced to do or be tempted to become maybe a pass-through, either on the material side or on the labor side. How best can DBEs resist the urge to just say, I'll tell you what, I'll be a pass-through. You can go ahead and work with this organization that you wanted to work with from the jump, and I'll just, take my little piece and go on and live happily ever after. How is that overcome for DBEs that are really trying to, break through and muster up, those, long-term relationships that can go on from project to project? Anybody can, jump in on that one.
First and foremost, you have to choose not to be a criminal.
Then there's that. Now no, there. Carry on, sir.
You have to decide what your service is and how you're going to deliver it, and how you're going to work with your contractor or whoever your customer is. And you're going to have to provide them with a superior service. If you put in a quote and you don't get chosen, you repeatedly don't get chosen, you need to not step away from that customer, but you need to step into it and ask them what it is that they want. What is your competition delivering that lets them choose these guys instead of you? Maybe it's a simple misunderstanding. Maybe the scope you're quoting is different than the scope your competition is choosing. Maybe they don't have any faith in you because they don't know who you are. You have to step in and network with your customer, with your prospective customer before and after the bid, and find out what services you need to deliver. There are criminals everywhere. It doesn't take very long in this business to run into criminals. It takes hours. And you will find people who are asking you to do things that are criminal just like they're doing. And you have to decide within yourself that you're not going to do that. It's a personal decision and you have to stick with it.
Anyone else on that point?
I'm not as funny as Mr. Mitchell, but to his point, they come out to the jobs, they take pictures, they want to know, is this your equipment? Are you operating it? They want to know who you're working for. And that's how they ensure that the DBEs on the job site are actually performing the work that they say that they're doing. So, a lot of times I wish I would have shaved, or, I wasn't looking so rough when they come out with these cameras, but that happens quite often.
Got you. So as a DBE, they gain their footing, they got the contract, go out, and celebrate. Hey, I got the contract. This is great. I begin on XYZ day, and you're doing it. You're a month in, and it's a multi-month job, and then there's a need for some change orders that shoot through. How, I guess, common are change orders, and how do change orders impact DBEs? And I guess this question maybe is more for you, Quinn, in terms of, hey, I got my rhythm, I got what I put out there as my scope being able to do. Now this comes up. Is there a one size fits all on the change order tip, or is it dependent upon the size of that change order will determine whether or not I can continue on moving forward or not?
Both, but really it's the size of the change order. So from my experience, nobody, gave me a heads up on how it worked, but like I keep mentioning, it's the payment structure that is the struggle for me as a growing entity in public work. It's the payment schedule. So a contractor will look at a job they want to bid on, and if they're not familiar with the plans in progress prosecution of a project, they'll say, oh, I can do this in 3 days, or I can do this in 2 weeks. And then they figure out those numbers that way. And then you find that there's, only a quarter of the project is opened up at a time. So they'll say, you can do this portion right now. We got to call you back to come back to do the other half. Then when we switch the traffic over or whatever it is, you can come do the third quarter of it. And so then you go, okay, well, when I bid this, maybe I was thinking I'd do this right away, and get paid for it right away. But then there's an end project date. So if you don't know, you're not going to get your final payment till the project is completed. But then there's this ASP4 that primes are supposed to adhere to, and I don't think that they interpret the rules of it. So if I get half the project to do, change order comes in, I've only done half of my work. I haven't gotten paid on 100% of that work completed. I've been paid what the contractor's been paid. If they've only gotten paid 50% of the project, or if the engineer hasn't said that my scope of work is 100% done, that's how I get paid, even though I may have done all of my work that I could do. And so for a change order come in and I got to pay for the fuel, I got to pay for the labor, I got to pay for the maintenance breakdowns. This could be detrimental to my cash flow if I have to do this change order. And then what I risk is losing my ability to do the job if I'm a growing entity. So that's just one job. If you're taking on multiple jobs and you don't know, have I taken on too much work? Have I not taken on too much work? You don't know how that cash flow is gonna pan out, because at least for me, concrete cutting is all intangibles. I'd be sitting on the couch half the time if it weren't for mistakes. So I'm based up as a service company, where somebody who cleans brush or may do other services for DOT projects, it's a little easier for them to, say that tree's not going anywhere. That tree's not growing a lot. They know their scope of work a lot more than somebody who may call me out and say, we got another, 300 feet of cutting that has to be done, a further distance away, something that I didn't plan for.
Got you. So with everybody, you got something, Brian? Go ahead. I'll go ahead.
My first thing to any contractor is don't do anything without a signed change order. It doesn't take much. It can start out with just an email describing the scope of work and what you're going to be paid for it when it has to be delivered. But you should do nothing without a signed change order. All they have to do is send you the email. My tuition moment for the day. I work for WisDOT. I did lots of WisDOT work. There are not many change orders in bridges. The first big non-WisDOT project I did was Miller Park. Miller Park was so terrible with change orders. Sometimes I'd bring the drawings in, and my foreman, I'd hand him the drawings, which would come into my office here in Madison by FedEx. My foreman would ball them up and throw them over his shoulder and say, that got poured last week. Right? That's how fast they were moving out there, and that generated tons of change orders. It ran through my office like a paper tidal wave. Had I known then what I know now, I'd have made a fortune at it. It almost killed me. Do nothing without a signed change order.
The one nice thing about a change order is if you bid the work out a year ago and it's a change order, it's a new scope, you can charge your new rates. The other creative change order is if it's within the scope of work and it's not different, you have to uphold your price for 125% of your quantity that you quoted. So whereas I may charge somebody $1,000 for a job because it could be somebody else. I charge $1,000 to do this job, but because it's within this project, they may get it for $40 because you got to uphold your price for 125% of your quantity in the DOT. And that's something that wasn't easily learned. That was a hard knock lesson. But when you have a change order, you also have a pay app that you have to apply for. So say your pay app day is on the 10th of the month, they call you in for this change order on the 11th. You come do this work. Now you wait for the rest of the month, and then the bill goes out. So now you're 45 days before you expect your payment doesn't come because it's got to get an okay from the municipality. They got to say, well, why do we have to do all of this? So they get 30 days. Then once they get their 30 days, the engineer gets another 10 days to okay it. So you do the math. You're out, what is that? 75, 85 days from the change order work you never planned to do. So if you're growing, you got to know that you can handle that type of work.
And you will have to have enough capital to continue to pay mortgage, car note, go out date night with the missus and all this kind of stuff too, while this bread is on its way to come. Wow. On that note, we're gonna move on. The picture we're trying to paint here is that, you know, the DBE piece is a worthwhile endeavor, but it's not for the faint of heart. And there are some things that you might want to know. And given that, you know, we don't always know what we don't know, you want to be as prepared as possible as you are diving into this particular, you know, realm of things. I want to just kind of tangential to that. There was a 2020 construction manager article. That's on the DBE side. DBEs are working with, you know, primes. And so this is not a one-way street. This is a reciprocal relationship where everybody has some skin in the game. A 2020 construction manager article cited a recent study finding 76% of Black and 77% of Asian employees in the construction industry reported limited career progression due to their race or other protected characteristics. What have been some keys to your career progression, gentlemen, in the construction field up here, in the construction sector, that kind of maybe flies in the face of that, or instances where you've witnessed some of that in your own career as you've had your upward trajectory? Anybody can start.
Again, my name is Daniel Webster. I graduated the trans training program in 2014. Went through the program. I had no prior experience about construction. One of the first jobs that I had taken was a flagging job, one of the most level entry positions within the industry. Did that for about a season, figured out that I really enjoyed working in construction, and took on another position as a traffic control technician with one of the traffic control companies here in the state. I worked on the I-41 corridor project, which was one of the major projects in the Northeast Wisconsin region, and really was able to establish a lot of relationships with a whole bunch of contractors, heavy highway. During that time, I decided to go back to school and pursue my bachelor's degree while working full time. But one of the things that Walbec had done and has done historically is be intentional about interacting throughout different communities in the state here. I spoke earlier today to a group internally. And if you're here long enough within the organization, you start to hear old stories, right? About how Walbec's leadership and ownership has really been outside of their own communities and interacting with underrepresented groups to try to figure out how to roll out opportunities. And so throughout working on the I-41 corridor, after I obtained my bachelor's degree, Walbec Group gave me an opportunity to work as an HR business partner. In that position, I've been able to really interact with a lot of different communities. I think between myself and my colleague, we've probably hired close to about 50 trans graduates within the last 5 years, which is very significant in terms of kind of the work that we're doing. So shout out to my man over here, Dan Ekstrom. You know, has done some incredible work throughout our community. And again, it's one of the reasons that I was drawn to the Walbec Group. So in my position now, being able to continuously move around and continue to be intentional about creating some of the relationships that we talk about here has opened up a lot of doors for other people to get involved with the industry.
Excellent. I'll go ahead, John.
You know, I would say, you know, piggybacking off of what Dan said, I'm also a trans. It's a new, obviously the name has changed now to Highway Construction Skills Training Pre-Apprenticeship Program. But I'm also a graduate back in 2004, 5, something back then. It was so long ago. But for me, you know, when you hear that data, like a lot of times people want to argue the data. They're like, no, well, it's not, well, the data is true. You know, it really is. When you're out on these job sites, I can think about when I was doing the market interchange. That's the first job I started on. Then I went down to Illinois and I worked on the Dan Ryan, and then I worked on I-88. I worked on, I worked on a bunch of stuff, like, and coming back up the I-94 corridor. And many times, if you do see someone who's Black or brown, they're on the floor, they're shoveling, they're doing the dirty work. But when you see the foreman roll up, or you see individuals, the superintendents roll up, you ain't seeing Black and brown folks roll up in there. And this is the thing in California. I was just in California last year and talking to them, and I looked at some of their data. And by far, their apprentices that they have in their apprenticeship program, I want to say it was 57% or 60% Latino. But when you look up the chain to who's in management, the number was under like 5%. So when you're talking about career progression, that's where we really see the issue, right? We talked about this, and I talk about this when my time in apprenticeship here in Wisconsin. The idea isn't that we can protect you. Once you get through your first year apprenticeship, because in apprenticeship, you can cancel somebody for probationary reasons, right? You don't even have to say why. It's just they're in probation. That's nationwide. Once I can get you through your first year, now you're protected, but you're only protected to the end of your apprenticeship program, because after that, now you have to stay connected to an employer. And that's where it becomes really challenging. We see individuals who get engaged with apprenticeship. We see Black and brown folks get engaged all the time, but they never make it through their apprenticeship program, right? Whether it's lack of mentorship, whether it's lack of seeing, their opportunity for growth, but we see it all the time. So when you think about that trajectory, for me, it ended up, I left the field in 2010 and then went into state government and now, working for a nonprofit, but that was on my own volition. That wasn't somebody who showed me what that looked like. And I think that's what's missing as well, is seeing individuals that are elevating up and coming back down, like Dan does a lot, go back down and say, this is a possibility. So it is very disheartening to see. It really is. I wanted to let you know it's just not a Wisconsin problem. This is a national problem with seeing Black and brown folks moving into any type of leadership role in the construction industry.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with Josh and some of what he's saying as far as the foreman roll up, all of those types of things. I guess my response as a prime contractor would be, we are working very diligently in closing that gap. One of the things that we have internally is a future foreman program, right? We're trying to identify gaps all the time within our organization so that we do close that gap between Black and brown leaders within our organization. Over the last couple of years, we have 2 affinity groups within our organization. One was for women, the other one was for people of color. And we're really trying to figure out how to mentor people, right? So that they can continuously go towards some of the things that they want to go towards. But it works both ways, right? We can do so much in terms of myself. It took a lot of advocating, right, on my own behalf. And I've had some good people too help me advance throughout the industry. But one of the things I do is what you said, Josh, was reach back, right? And so I'm constantly going back and having conversations with people, asking them, hey, what do you want to do? With our trans group that's housed at NWTC in Northeast Wisconsin right now, I just interact with that group. And I said, there's a civil engineering program across the hallway. When you're on break, walk across this school and go learn about the civil engineering program so that we can continuously create this pipeline. Because it's not enough for us to continuously bring people in that level entry roles. I need to see people next to that look like. And so we are being very intentional about creating some representation throughout our organization.
And I want you all to know, like what Dan is saying and what Walbec is doing, that's a perfect example of recognizing what the issue is and addressing the issue. Many employers don't address the issue. They know it's there, but they run from it. They're more scared to be labeled as racist or sexist instead of calling it out and saying, hey, this is an issue. Like, let's figure out what it is. I tell employers all the time, you want to start an apprenticeship program, the number one question I say is, let me see what your board of directors look like. When I look at their board of directors and it's all middle-aged white men, I was like, who are you recruiting? Like, help me understand who you're trying to bring into your organization. And when they say, well, we're trying to recruit in diverse communities, we want women. I'm like, no, you're not going to get any, because when you look at this board of directors, I have to see myself. You have to envision me seeing myself making it to that board of director level. That's how you have to treat everyone who walks through your door, is that one day they could own your company or they can own a company. And if you treat them like that, Now you're starting to give people that pathway, and now you're not saying you're just going to shovel for the rest of your career. And I think that's the intentionality. And I love what Walbec does. Obviously, Walbec is they've signed our national pledge. I've done work with Walbec for our group doing webinars, but they've done some great work there at identifying that. And what I love about them, and Dan, I love that you outlined it, is they're working on it. And that's the key. That's the key, is recognizing it and changing it, not running away from it.
Excellent. We've been extending, I think, a couple of minutes to kind of close out. And I hear folks out in the hallway, maybe some of the other groups have kind of let out, but I wanted to give you all an opportunity. Right, because it's cracking. I had about 3 or 4 more questions too. I want to open the floor to our audience. I know they might have some questions based on some of the fat information you all have been given. I see you, Doc. See you, my man here. Go ahead, Doc. Then Randy.
Congratulations to the brothers on the panel who came to the Transportation Alliance for Solutions program. When we planted as a former Deputy Secretary of Transportation here, we planted those seeds to see you on a stage like this, doing what you're doing. So proud of both of you in that regard. So I have a question, and this has been a good conversation, but the title of this section is the Deconstructing Implicit Bias. And so before we close, I want to hear something about implicit bias. Where's the bias? Where's the bias on the workforce side, and where we can't get enough Black and brown people in the pipeline so they can do the jobs in construction? And where's the bias on the DBE side, where brown and Black businesses are still not getting enough work to sustain their business? So talk just before you close this session out about, some of the implicit bias that you have experienced in the industry. Anybody?
Come on, Mr. Mitchell.
So I'll use an anecdote that I've talked to you about, Ruben. In fact, I sat on an apprenticeship committee, and we would have apprentices come into the committee when they had problems, when they were somehow needed to be plumbed up. And we would get a folder, and in the folder would be the apprentice and what his malfunction was. And we'd sit there in this room with people who I respected, and they'd go through the folder, and someone would say, "Oh, what's his name? I know this name. Who is this guy? I don't think I've met him." And he'd say, "Oh yeah, you worked with his uncle on the powerhouse up at Portage." And pretty soon, "Oh yeah. And pretty soon it had gone from disciplining this person to guiding him, right? Everybody was in agreement that we were going to guide this person. You'd have a minority or a woman who'd come in with a similar malfunction or some other malfunction, and the attitude would be, "We don't have to take this crap. We're going to put them on a short, brittle leash, and if they don't like it, there's all sorts of people standing in line waiting for this spot." It's a lack of social capital. It's a lack of, it's an implicit racism. It's an implicit bias that is established by people wanting to work with people who they know and look like and who they feel comfortable with. I'll tell one other story. I worked on Camp Randall. I had at that time 75% of all the Black iron workers in Madison working. 75%, that was 3 guys. Okay. They're all working on Camp Randall. I'm walking down Monroe Street from the job shack over there to talk to them. And people stopped me repeatedly to talk to me. People of color saw these guys working up here with this rebar, and they stopped me repeatedly and asked me who they were and how they could get involved. And it's the exact opposite, right? They saw themselves suddenly. They'd stop seeing just general construction and something. They saw something where they could see themselves, and they wanted to know how they could get involved with it. What does it pay? What do I have to do? How do I contact the union? Those are my 2 stories.
Excellent. Go ahead, Quinn. You can.
Okay, real quick, implicit bias for me, when I was an employee, they wouldn't give me the saw. And when they let me cut with the saw, they gave me a dull blade. Then when they gave me a truck, the truck didn't have any working equipment. So now the job site, They see me, they figure I don't know what I'm doing. Then they treat me like I'm a hindrance. So now I have to not only prove I have the fortitude to do the job that I was sent to do, I got to do it with bad equipment. Now I'm in business. I think I'm the only one up here who's fighting a free capitalism war. I'm trying to make as much money as I can because I don't have a job. I don't mean to offend anyone. But today, I'll give you an example of what implicit bias is for me as an owner. We'll say the NBA. I'll use that because my sons just won conference last week. They play basketball. Thanks. First time in Tulsa West history that they won conference. So I'm real proud. I have a freshman and a junior on the varsity team. So I'll use the NBA as an analogy. The NBA regulates basketball play. And each state has a team, right? So Wisconsin, we'd be the Bucks. Okay. So if I want to play for the Bucks in Wisconsin as a business owner, who's on the starting lineup? Maybe Michels, maybe Walbec group, they're on the starting lineup. I'll be 4 years in business in May. So let's call me a draft pick. Okay. So we got the starting lineup up here, and then my competitors may also be in the starting lineup. My competitors have been doing it 25, 50 years. Okay. So here I am with the potential, or maybe the promise, who knows? But there's a lot of stereotypes that we face and a lot of implicit bias that we face on a job site where they wouldn't even give me the saw. So we give up before we get the saw. But I didn't. Well, we're not here talking about me in that aspect. If you want to learn more about my history, I'd love to talk to you. But so here I am as a draft pick, and my competitors and the people I want to work for on the starting lineup. And why is there a DBE program? It's because we're trying to all be included in the race. We're trying to attain this wealth. So my competitors, they may have been around through a couple of recessions, maybe a depression, depending on how long my competitor has been in business, but definitely some primes have sustained, through the economy and its ups and downs. And I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to create a sustained growth. I've got guys who, they want to work, and I give them the saw. I just have to give them more work, and that's hard when I'm not in the starting lineup. Now, there's a cap on how much DBEs are making, where the primes don't have a cap on how much money they can make. However much work they can attain and do and successfully, they're getting paid to do that work. Where if I want to start a new service, I say, hey, I have a trucking background. I can work on a dump truck in and out. They say, where's your certification that says you're DBE? Because we're not going to use you unless you got that paper. So I'm capped in the free market race. And I think that's the implicit bias where, I keep going to payment structure. Like, why should I have to go through the same payment process as a conglomerate who, isn't supposed to retain any of my money, but they do. And they may not think it's fair that I should get my retainer, because they have to go through a retainer, or their other subs have to go through a retainer, or they may not think that their subs are going to do work at a high level, and they're trying to cover their end and what their subs aren't performing. And it's in their best interest to hold my retainer that I shouldn't be having held. And that's where I think the implicit bias is unfair, that here I am growing, working hand in hand with Walbec Group, but yet when it comes to getting paid, I have to jump through the same hoops that they have to jump through.
Got you. Doc, thanks for bringing that up. One other thing, I'm gonna have Randy, he had a question as well. The other piece that we hear a lot about is that when we talk about meeting DBE goals, and it gives the veneer that, everybody is getting, equal share of the pie, but it seems like maybe 80% of said goal being reached is, non-ethnic minority, folks getting it, i.e. white women getting the contracts. How is it that we can get more of the pie, since they're eating, but the ethnic minority DBEs aren't eating as much. How can we maybe even that out some? What has been your experience there? And after this answer, I'll have Randy answer his question. All righty then. An eerie silence befell the room. In other news, but that's been one of the things we've talked about as well. That's been, a challenge. The question is that if there can be contracts found for that disadvantaged group, let's find some bread for other disadvantaged groups as well. Randy,
As,
anybody want to take a stab at that? Oh, go
So-
ahead, Dan.
so again, I worked as an HR business partner here prior to moving into this role, right? And so I've actually terminated people in those types of situations myself. So we address those promptly all the time. There's never any exception. I mean, we don't care if it's a foreman or somebody that's a senior level person within our organization. We're taking action when any of that stuff occurs. So.
One thing to really quickly answer, I loved how you said that, Randy, and I'm gonna frame that. Actually, the national numbers show 35% of people complete an apprenticeship program. Only 24% of Black apprentices complete, right? And that 10% doesn't seem like a lot, but when you think nationally, over 500,000 apprentices, right? You're talking a lot of apprentices, only 24% that are Black that complete. They are the absolute lowest in completing of registered apprenticeship programs. I want to repeat that. Black apprentices are the lowest in graduating their registered apprenticeship program. So when we talk about implicit bias, I actually like to call it blatant racism. And it's just what it is. That's what exists. That's what I saw when I was out in the field. That's what I see now in these conversations. When Brian talks about the committees, right? I used to be over those committees. Those committees were as part of apprenticeship, and I used to have to deal with those issues that came up and have those conversations. So unfortunately, as we're talking about how to continue to move the needle forward, it's really getting, to your point, Randy, those cowboys in the field. And that's where we have to figure out how to recruit the new generation or how to recruit those individuals in. I will tell you one thing, this is my personal, Joshua Johnson, personal opinion. When we talk about why we're missing, and I'm just going to use Black apprentices just as an example. When we talk about why we're missing Black apprentices in the industry, I always look back to the individuals my father's age. And I always think about the generation that went through and dealt with what Randy talked about, like dealt with all of the issues, right? Made great money, moved to the suburbs, kids were able to go to college. And in that mentality, that person who went through all of that said, I don't want you to experience this. And what happened then is because you don't want your child to experience that success that you experienced and the joy that you did have in it, now we lost the generation coming into it. So it's a really fine line to walk, and I understand why, as being a parent myself. But when we're talking about how to get them back in, we really have to get them back in by addressing two things. Number one, we have to address their own implicit bias of the industry, because folks are like, I'm not coming in there to work. I'm not getting called the N-word. I'm not going to get talked about or, get messed with. But then we also have to look at the industry and say, stop thinking that, I won't put the company on blast in Wisconsin here, but I've had to correct them in what they say when they advertise, when they say they are looking for workers, they say, this is hard work and this is dirty work. And it's like, implicitly, I know exactly what they're saying, and I know exactly who they're trying to keep out, because they feel like if you tell somebody Black or brown that this is hard, they're just going to say, oh, I don't want to do it. Well, I'm going to be honest, at 45, if you tell me something's hard, I'm not going to want to do it either. Like at the end of the day. So it's thinking about it from those perspectives. It's twofold. We have to, we as an industry, well, you all as an industry, but then we all as this collective effort really have to focus on looking at both sides of it and continuing to challenge it, because it's not just implicit bias. It truly is blatant racism.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Quinn.
For me, all my employees are Black. They live in RPP areas. I put 2 guys in the apprenticeship program, and You know, the way I teach how to cut and do jobs, they go, this is easy. This is like cleaning. I say, okay, you look at it that way, but you know, it's a work culture that I grew accustomed to. You get up, sometimes you got to get up at 4 a.m. to be on time for work. On time for work isn't your start time, it's 30 minutes before. So there's a culture thing missing. I was lucky enough to grow up with a broom and a shovel in my hand and do hard work, but I have to be flexible with my guys to keep them engaged. And that's different. Where, you know, when I was in college, you know, in team studies we were doing, you know, companies were adopting flexibility, letting women who have children at home, you know, come in early or something and go take care of the kids, come back and work later. Well, there's a lot of Black fathers out there who need that too. And me being one, I raised my sons by myself from the ages of 5 and 3. I had them, so that kept me from not only pursuing a career, but you know, a career first, then finishing school, then a business. So you know, I have to be flexible with my guys on my team and say, okay, your car doesn't work, you know, you got a court date, you don't have anybody to watch the kids. Like it's a constant juggling, and they all have other side hustles. They sell cars. They have their own residential concrete pouring that they do. Like they do. So people today do so many different things just to stay afloat. And so it's the flexibility and trying to figure out, okay, you know, I need you, we need you, your coworker needs you right now. Who can do what right now? And that's the only thing that's been able to help me keep my guys showing up for work when I need them.
Excellent. Will?
Real quick. I just want to say that I don't think there's much question as to whether or not we all have some type of implicit bias. What I challenge you to do is go online, take one of those implicit bias tests and see just how screwed up you are. And if you have employees and you happen to be a prime contractor, you might want to think about your employees too. Because if you're screwed up, there's a good chance they are too. And don't use your implicit bias to assume that they're worse than you. You might actually be worse than them. Just a little joke there. But the point is, I think that it's something that we should look at. A lot of these things, it's not conscious, it's unconscious. It's something that we came up with. And for whatever reason, we think we're good in what we're in our beliefs, our ideals. But if it's affecting other people negatively, if it's causing the kind of issues that we're hearing up here from these folks who have been in this space, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. But I just feel like we need to look at ourselves in the mirror in regards to what's going on. And if you're thinking that, you know, these things are going on and you're not addressing it, you have to be deliberate about it. You have to confront it. You have to deal with it, or you're part of the problem.
Last thing I'll say, go ahead. More question? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Shannon. So you're exactly correct. As I go out and I look on the landscape for finding diverse contractors to work on Michael's projects, they are 75% white females. They are white females who have some background in construction for the most part. They have a father, an uncle, a brother who is doing the projects that we're looking for subcontractors to do. And it is indeed a problem. What is Michael's doing about it? They are responding most aggressively to what their clients ask them to do. Like most companies, the owner gets what the owner wants. In the case of most clients or public agencies, the public agencies ask for a combined goal that can be met with white females or diverse contractors, and they are going to give them what they want. They are going to give them what it takes for them to get the job to stay alive and to do their business. And as long as the owners ask for this, and as long as they continue with this, the contractors like Michael's in this size will continue to do it. That's the short and to the point answer. Can we do more? Can we do better? Yes, but I won't say but. I will say the pressures of the owner to get their low price bids with short horizons looking at it, spread all over the country, is very difficult.
With that being said, Brian, before you go, Dan, does that mean, are we gonna get kicked out of this room? Last season, we're gonna wrap it up. We are gonna have everybody, they don't know how to hush. But to that end, does that mean then that the targets then should be to kind of bring a bit more equity to this space for ethnic diverse businesses? The owners then should be the ones that, we ought to be talking to, establishing a relationship with, making the business case for opening this up a bit more, given that the
In
owner
my
knows what he or
opinion-
she wants.
In my opinion,
Okay.
an organization like NAMAC representing the contractors
Mhm.
has an opportunity to operate in that space. And I'm very glad NAMAC is here and NAMAC provides this forum to do that.
Mhm.
Let me also say that, like I say, the owner gets what the owner wants. The owner wants red carpeting in the vestibule. No contractor brings him blue carpeting and says, I got a deal on it. Right? They bring him the red carpet that he asks for.
Got it.
So I think that's a difficult place for the contractors, for the individual contractors, especially subcontractors, to operate in working with the owners. I hear it all the time. I talk to people all the time about supplier diversity, and what they always tell me, they start talking to me about George Floyd. And they tell me that George Floyd died, and that's their big push, and it made everybody in the boardroom take notice, and everybody wants to do this. But at the same time, who I don't see at these events is the white female contractors, because they don't have to be here.
Mhm.
They don't have to be here. They've got their connection, they've got their hookup.
Touche, touche. Dan.
Before we leave here, I just wanted to give some voice and agency to our indigenous group here. There are a lot of tribal members in this space. When I came into the industry, there wasn't a whole lot of representation. And when we talk about bias, I think sometimes we're often left out of some of these statistics that we're reporting out as well. So again, there's this sense of invisibility when it comes to indigenous communities. But I just want to say that we're here. We're here, we're still here. There's a lot of folks that are willing to go to work. We have DBEs in this space, Brian Wilson, my man George over here. We're here.
Word up. Welcome. We see y'all too. Well, folks, I'm getting the message, the hook from Sandman. I don't want to get pulled off the stage with a cane. So thank you all for being participatory in this. As you guys can see, we went a little overtime because it was thick, rich, and chocolatey discussion. We'll continue it on. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks for your patience and participation. Give the panel another hand, and we are adjourned. Thank you.